Good afternoon, viewers. My name is OPONE Amanda, and I'll be your host for today. I have here with me my colleague.
Adebayo.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking about something very, very informative, which has to do with the use of good English in journalism. And yes, we have an important guest with us today in the house. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
How are you, sir?
Okay, my name is Dr. Ganiu Abisoye. I lecture in the Department of English, Lagos State University, and I'm a columnist with Business Day newspaper.
So, sir, as an English teacher and a lecturer, what is your experience working with media?
Okay, what exactly has been my experience working with the media? My engagement with the media hasn't exactly been a very formal one. For a very long time, I was just a freelance writer. I'd write my articles and then send them to all the emails of the different newspapers that I have got with me. Then they just publish randomly. And so that would mean I have published in virtually all major Nigerian newspapers. But by 2020, I became a columnist with Business Day newspaper. And then since then, I have been a regular writer with Business Day. Right, but then I still write on different topics and I get to publish in other newspapers. So my relationship with the media hasn't been any formal one. I just do my thing from the distance and then it gets to them and they publish as they like.
So, sir, what is the importance of English grammar in journalism?
It is of utmost importance. I think the standard is seriously dropping, and then it is something that calls for intervention. While we were growing, journalists were role models to users of the language. Sadly, it doesn't seem to be so anymore. And then, for anyone who is in the business of communicating, grammar is inevitable.
Yes.
Right? Grammar is of utmost importance. So it is important that you are grammatically informed such that you are able to detect uh, language issues such as ambiguity, such as empty sentences, such as padded sentences. I'll give you an example. If you say a decision was taken on the boat, a decision was taken on the boat. Depending on the grammatical analysis, that sentence would mean that a decision was taken concerning the boat. All right. If you choose to interpret it as a decision subject was taken on verb, the boat object, that gives you the meaning that a decision was taken concerning the boat. And then that could also give you the meaning that a decision was taken while on the boat. So that becomes a decision subject, okay, was taken verb on the boat adjunct. Such ambiguities should be what a journalist is capable of demystifying. And this makes grammar something of utmost importance because I round off that question by saying that knowing a language is knowing its grammar,
Yeah.
and knowing the grammar of a language is knowing the language.
Okay, sir. That leads me to the next question, sir. How would you define good teaching? Because you really sound like a good teacher. So, how would you define good teaching? And can you please describe your teaching style to us? Like, how do you tend to, carry the whole students along, being the lecturer? And how
If
do you,
it will not mean sounding arrogant, I am indeed a good teacher.
yes,
Right? And then one thing that works for me is that I make my class student centered. The first thing that is essential to quality delivery as a teacher is that the classroom should be student centered. By being student centered, one, you have to engage the students.
Yeah.
You do not see yourself like an encyclopedia Britannica or the repertoire of knowledge that does not need the opinion, the input of the students. You need to make them understand that they are rational beings that are capable of making constructive and logical contributions. All right. So by that, I would mean that the classroom in the 21st century has got to be dialogic. The classroom in the 21st century has got to be interactive such that you get the student involved in what you're doing. And if I have to now narrow it down to teaching, I have been delivering lectures recently on what I call communicative approach to language teaching. For a very long time, we've done formal teaching where we crammed definitions like they were poems. A noun is the name of any person, animal, place, or thing. A pronoun is a word used instead of a. You now have students who can define all of these concepts but cannot identify them in structures. So we need to take a communicative approach to language teaching. It is not enough to let students know that these words are nouns. What is important is to make them know what a noun does, so that when when a word which ordinarily is a noun becomes a verb, they can tell that by virtue of this contextual configuration, this word is no longer a noun. For instance, if you pick a word like house, and then you say the house is big, something is big. What is the name? House. Because it has a name, it is a noun. By the time you now have I house my friends, I do something. What do I do? House. The act of doing is a verb. So house in I house my friends is no longer a noun but a verb. So as a teacher, you do not tell the student that house is a noun. You should tell them what a noun does, so that when a word which ordinarily is a noun becomes a verb, they can identify it. This is what I call communicative approach to language teaching. So any kind of teaching must engage the students and should not be formalistic. You should not just dish out information. You have to engage the students, get into an interactive relationship with them, and be sure that the message gets to them.
Okay. Moving on to the next question. I mean, judging from your profile, sir, because when I saw your profile, I was really wow. How about you?
I was very well also.
You were, right? Seriously, sir. So, I want to ask, how are you able to combine all of these professions together? And I'm sure there are also challenges involved. And so, I would also want to know how you were able to, deal with all of these challenges. So.
Okay, so I will not exactly call them different professions. I'll just describe them as different sides to the same thing. They are all okay. So teaching English, writing on communication, making skits in English, all have the same thematic preoccupation. But then, what I think you may want to know or be interested in is maybe my consistency with some of those things. For instance, I've been a columnist with Business Day newspaper since April 2020, and I've not missed my column in a week in over 3 years.
Wow.
I have skits that address different aspects of English, about 10, and I've probably done this consistently. I do English for Today, where I teach aspects of English grammar every morning during the week. I've done that for about 7 years, right? And then if you ask me what has sustained me, I will say it is, on the one hand, my passion for it.
Yeah.
My passion to see people speak well, my passion to see people become good users of language, okay, my passion to see people communicate well. And on the other hand, I will also ascribe it to setting priorities right.
Okay.
Setting priorities right. I work more than I play. For instance, okay, so as a columnist, I have to write between 800 and 900 words every week. So imagine that you have to do that every week, and you've done that for over 3 years. There are times that for 2-3 hours, I am in this same office alone, racking my head. Racking, for instance, not cracking. Yeah? Racking my head on what am I going to be teaching this week. And then finally, when you think of a topic, you begin to gather materials. All right, so it is on the one hand the passion, it is on the other hand commitment and setting priorities right. I am very mindful of what takes my time. So for anybody who wants to venture into writing or any other kind of engagement, you just need to be passionate about it and set your priority right. I do not know if you're going to ask that, but I must quickly tell you that one danger with being a writer is that writing is a craft that grows in isolation. If you would be a great writer, you have to be someone who enjoys being you who enjoys your own company.
Yeah.
You have to enjoy your own company. And the danger in that is that if you are not careful, you will die a lonely person. That's the danger. The craft grows in isolation. To be a writer, you need to spend time with yourself. And by the time you always spend time with yourself, a time will come you will realize that you are no longer used to being with people. And when you need people, if you are not careful, they will not be there. So it is important to strike the balance. You need your time, but despite that, you have to be available to the society too.
Thank you very much. And I actually love the way you tend to balance things with, like, just as what you said, because being a writer, you being in isolation and you not knowing how to
Sometimes your
do
friends
the balance.
your friends might think you are withdrawing from
Yeah,
them. They don't know
exactly,
that's
exactly.
ahead.
So that leads me to something I really want to know. What is your inspiration? So, like, what inspires you to, write? Like, you being a columnist and a writer, what inspires you? How do you get your inspiration?
I was not inspired to become a columnist. But then, if you ask what inspired me to be a writer, I've always loved knowledge. But when it comes to writing, the inspiration was basically a statement I had when I went for my master's in the University of Ibadan. And the statement is that in academia, the slogan is publish or perish.
Hmm.
So if you must enjoy relevance as an academic, you have to be a writer. An academic is not known to be a talker. If you talk well, it is just an addition. What makes you a renowned scholar is when you write. I had to pray about it in 2015 that God, I just don't want to be a good speaker. I want to be a writer. And then I began to work towards it. But then if you would want to know how I became a columnist during COVID-19, and then that's one thing. Whether it's writing, whether it's anything, you need to be creative. All right. I delivered a lecture recently on the importance of the field of humanities. For those in sciences, they deal with things. Those of us in arts and humanities, communication, we deal with humans. And then three things are important. You have to be able to think creatively. Okay, think creatively, and then, think logically, act creatively, and be able to survive in a changing world. Think critically, okay, act creatively, and be able to survive in a changing world. Anybody who will be relevant in the field of communication must know that. How did I become a columnist? In 2020, during COVID-19, I published an article titled Grammar and COVID-19, where I was applying my knowledge of grammar to the social experience of COVID-19 pandemic. It was published in Vanguard newspaper. I wouldn't know how the editor-in-chief of Business Day newspaper stumbled upon the article, and then he got my number and messaged me himself that he found the article and it was one of the best things he had read in recent times, that he would want me to become a columnist. So I know people apply sometimes to become columnists with different newspapers, but that was not my case. I was just writing as a freelance writer, and then I got the invitation to.
This is really a great inspiration. I think I'll not write a good
Sir, so a follow-up to your response. You said it's not just about writing. You prayed to God. You also wanted to know how to write because you could already speak. So are you saying they are married together, being a speaker and a writer? Some people they are withdrawn. They don't have that confidence to be in the face of people, but they can write very well. They're pen masters. So are they really married together?
They are not married together. There are great orators who are not very good writers. And then each of these requires its mastery. Writing is a bigger deal. You are a communication student, and then you know the 4 communication skills: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And they're classified in 2 ways: the oracy literacy classification and the reception production classification. In the reception production classification, listening and reading are receptive skills. Okay? Speaking and writing are productive skills. Then, using the oracy literacy classification, listening and speaking are oracy skills. They are skills every normal human being possess. You do not need any formal education to listen and to speak, although you may need formal trainings to sharpen these skills. They are not skills you need formal trainings to possess, but you may need formal trainings to sharpen them. But then reading and writing are literacy skills. There are no born readers, there are no born writers, except in the Islamic worldview, where it is assumed that Allah made Muhammad read by means of supernatural intervention. Ikra, read, all right, by the grace of your maker. So it was even a spiritual intervention for Muhammad to have read without being taught. So naturally, nobody reads or writes without being taught. So writing is a bigger deal compared to speaking. Any idiot can speak, although there are good speakers. But when it comes to writing, it is an act that takes time to grow. And I must mention that there are no born writers. It takes time to get there. There was a time I would struggle to write 500 words. Okay, for instance, our academic publications will be told to write between 5,000 and 8,000 words. When I started publishing academic articles, it used to be a problem. How do I write 5,000 words, for heaven's sake? But now when I want to publish articles, I have to keep reminding myself that, well, it must not exceed 8,000 words.
Wonderful.
All right, so it's some kind of metamorphosis. You grow, you get better at it. So writing is a craft that needs very good trainings to get better at it. And finally, you cannot be a writer if you are not a reader.
Very true, sir. That just seems
Yes.
very true. Thank you very much, sir. Sir, I would like to ask, what advice would you, give up and coming writers and journalists on error-free writers? Because when we see some writers today, like
Jokes.
I don't know, and then they call themselves journalists.
Even with already established organizations.
Exactly. So, sir, what do you have to say about that?
They need to understand that grammar, which is the core of any language, is something you must continue to learn. I have published 2 books on grammar and I am still learning, especially in this part of the world where we are second language users of the language. It's not our mother tongue. Even for our mother tongues, if you need to speak eloquently and write well in your mother tongue, you still have to learn it, not to say a language which is a second language. So we have to keep learning. After I had bagged my PhD in English, there was a day I picked Brighter Grammar, a book used by primary school students, and I was amazed at the number of things I came across in that book that I hadn't ever known about. When I pick my book that I authored and I read them over, I tend to ask myself, so was I the one that also wrote this thing here? So everybody who uses language must understand that you must continue to grow your ability to write well by getting good grammar textbooks. That's one. You must have good grammar textbooks that you read regularly. Listen to native speakers. Okay, listen to native speakers. And when I say listen to native speakers, I do not just mean you should watch American movies. I mean, listen to native speakers on their news outlets, okay, BBC, what have you, CNN. When you listen to newscasters on these international stations, you tend to boost your ability to use the language. So anybody who writes must not stay away from grammar. You must always, at every point in time, be found with a grammar book, and then you need your dictionary with you. I do not advise that people should read dictionary. Well, because in the end, you just find people who have very wide vocabulary but do not know how to put the words together.
I think that's
that's where. So having so many words without knowing how to put them together is like having many clothes and not knowing how to combine colors. All right. So knowing the simple rules that guide the use of language, and one thing that characterizes my writing is that a JSS 3 student will conveniently read my articles. I do not bamboozle. I do not set out to impress. I set out to impact. All right. So for many writers, they do not just want to impress, They do not just want to impact, they want to impress. Why are you being flabbergasted when you could simply be surprised? All right? Why are you purchasing when you could simply buy? You do not even know the rules that guide how words are put together, yet you want to sound grandiloquent. What Nigerians call big English. All right? So, the final thing I want to say is that for writers, if you really want to get better at the art, remember you have to KISS, KISS, and that means you have to keep it short and simple.
Exactly. Hope you all heard that.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, wrapping up. So you're an educationist, which means you are big on morals. So I want to know your opinion on the altercation with Seun Kuti and the Nigerian police.
If we want to look at it, I do not consider Seun Kuti's act reasoning. If not for any other reason, for the fact that the policeman was in uniform. He was in uniform, not on uniform. You are in whatever you are wearing. Okay, you could be putting on that thing, but you are in that thing. Okay, so for the fact that the man was in uniform, he could have respected the uniform. Slapping that man was like slapping the sovereignty of Nigeria, which of course was a wrong thing to do. But then you have to be careful when you judge people. He was just a human being. If you were in his shoes, you probably could have acted in a worse
People
way.
even argue that he suffered from PTSD. The way the police and the army has handled his family growing up, he was witnessing everything. So he said he was suffering from
But
post-traumatic
it's not so. I try not to be a judge in other people's story. I just express my opinion. I would say it would have been better if he hadn't slapped the policeman, but then that he did it was just probably one of those things that you would find yourself doing without knowing you could have acted in that manner. Because I thought Seun is more civil
Yes.
than to have acted in that manner. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. Your contributions are most appreciated, sir.
Yeah.
Very, very much.
So amazing. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for the privilege of this interview too.
We've come to the end of this session, and I'm sure we have all been able to learn one or two on how to use grammar in journalism and the right context. So keep up with us. We are going to be informing you on more of this.